Folks, Why Would You Ask That is a podcast that answers some of the weirdest questions. A lot of those are inappropriate for some listeners. If you're squeamish, easily disturbed, or just having a bad day, this may not be for you. But if you've got to know the answers like we do, stay tuned.
Why would you ask that? Presented by me, they, them, and
Karen, she, her, and
Remy, he, him. And today we're picking up our discussion of Sherlock Holmes by talking about queer coding in Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's original Sherlock Holmes novels. So, there's an author named Graham Robb who wrote a book called Strangers, Homosexual Love in the 19th Century. And I'm going to quote him a whole lot because he writes a lot about this subject, and so he has a lot of really good quotes about it, about like Doyle's private life and his feelings towards homosexuality and like evidence about homosexuality in the Victorian period. And so this is where I pull facts from about this time period. So I'm just going to be giving you plenty of quotes from this book. And then I'll link the book on our resource page. That way you can read it if you want to. This is my literal field, is talking about 19th century books that are gay.
love it.
In this book, Robb writes, Conan Doyle himself was ambivalent on the subject of homosexuality, but he had, at one point, he was like a big, nowadays I think we would just call him a social justice warrior, which is stupid, but he was into this kind of stuff. He tried to defend a man named Roger Casement in a trial that he was in, where he was put up in front of a jury. Then his homosexuality came to light through a bunch of journals that the man wrote. And after the homosexuality stuff came to light, Arthur Conan Doyle went to him and asked him for information about his, quote, sexual perversion.
Oh.
And just wanted information about it. Just wanted to know about it. He was like, I'm just curious. Can you just tell me about it?
Mm-hmm.
tell me about what it is to be gay.
And then he still defended him publicly after that. Just for one thing. Just for the first point. Because this was still the 19th century. So it was still not okay for Doyle to just even be defending the gay guy.
Yeah.
So after that, Doyle was also publicly supportive of Oscar Wilde.
Mm-hmm.
Him and Wilde were friends. They met each other in August 1889 on an evening which Arthur Conan Doyle called a golden evening, and also said that Wilde had made an indelible impression, quote, on him. This is Doyle's quotes, not Graham Robb's quotes. These are Arthur Conan Doyle's quotes. And then Robb adds that if you look at the way that Sherlock Holmes is described and the way that Oscar Wilde looks, the two of them have a striking resemblance to one another.
That's true.
As far as being tall, dark, pale, dandies.
Mm-hmm. Just all around hot.
Wilde, he wrote Picture of Dorian Gray. This was the book which got him into his homosexuality trials. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle called this book a book that was, quote, and this is a quote from Doyle again, surely upon a high moral plane, he called the book.
Oh, wait. Doyle said that about the Picture of Dorian Gray?
Yeah, about the Picture of Dorian Gray, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle says that the book was surely a book which was upon a high moral plane. End quote.
I mean, I have to read it again because I need to read it from a queer point of view, because when I originally read it, I was like, oh my God, he's just a hedonist. This is so bad.
No, you've got it. You've got it. He's a hedonist.
Yeah. Yeah. Like,
that's the book.
That's the book. I know that's the book. I'm just like, I'm like, will I look at it any different now that I'm like not as prejudiced against queer people as I was in my youth? It definitely was a turning point for me, that book. Like, yeah, I loved it. I just really enjoyed reading it. And then the movie. I love Ben Barnes.
Yeah, he's great.
He should play Sherlock Holmes.
Oh, he's got a good look for it.
He has the look.
So, yes, at the same time that the book was being called in the press, like, obviously homoerotic, Doyle was like, well, clearly the book is of a high moral plane, though. So, this is Doyle's opinion of homosexuality and the homosexual people that he was familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
So, here, I just have a picture for you that I just want to share.
Is it Ben Barnes as Dorian?
No, it's a picture of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle is in this picture, and it's a picture of him and his gay cricket team.
Oh my god! They're so cute. I love their mustaches.
And there's a lot of really cool people in there. Like,
yeah. Who else in here?
You got, well, let's see, P.G. Wodehouse is in there. Scrolling around a little. There's Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Let's see, scroll some more. Next row.
Trying to read it.
Front row, you've got, looking for more names that are very familiar. You've got J.M. Barrie is in there. Yeah, those are the three big ones.
Yeah. So cute.
I just have that picture. Them. I just wanted to show it. So that book, The Picture of Dorian Gray, was used as evidence against Oscar Wilde in his 1895 gross indecency trial. So for all the people that are like, Sherlock Holmes was not gay in the books, I just like to remind people that it was the 19th century, and of course he wasn't gay in the books. This was almost unheard of, that people were actually gay in the books, because when people were openly gay in the books, stuff like that happened. They went on gross indecency charges, and then they went to jail for 2 years, and then they died. So, of course he wasn't. But there is a lot of stuff going on in the books that's pretty queer-coded for the Victorian age. If you know anything about the Victorian age, or lived in the Victorian age, people would have picked up on it. So let's just go through it. As I mentioned, like, way at the beginning, this was my first point. Many readers at the time believed that Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson existed, and that Arthur Conan Doyle just was their editor. So just pretending for a minute that they were real people, like a bunch of people thought they were. 1895 was a really important year because of Oscar Wilde's trials, and a lot of homosexual people in London fled for a few months until things calmed down. So who else also exited London for a while in 1895?
Was it Sir Arthur Conan Doyle?
No, it was Sherlock Holmes and Watson left London in 1895 in the books.
Oh!
According to Watson in the book The Three Students, quote, "It was in the year 95 that a combination of events, into which I need not enter, caused Mr. Sherlock Holmes and myself to spend some weeks in one of our great university towns."
Oh my god, gaycation.
They leave London for like several weeks, and then they come back for a short period, but then they not only leave London, they leave the country for quite a while. They go to Norway.
I love it. I mean, it's sad that they had to run away, but they didn't run away anyway because they're not real, but still, that this happened.
I love the implication that they did.
Yeah, so a lot of people thought that they were real people. So they read this book in 1895 when this charge was going on, and a bunch of gay people were fleeing London, and they were like, oh, well, Mr. Holmes and Dr. Watson are fleeing London. Oh. That's the implication it would have had to the Victorian people of the time, who thought they were real people. Anyway.
Wow.
So, yeah, later, the quote for later is, quote, "If you want me for the trial, my address and that of Watson will be somewhere in Norway," is what Holmes says later on.
Wow.
Implying that, once again, they're planning to leave London, and just not just even just leave London, but the country entirely. And Holmes is unhappy about being away from his home. He's not just leaving because he wants to leave. Because Watson, you can tell that he doesn't want to leave. Watson says, My friend's temper had not improved since he had been deprived of the congenial surroundings of Baker Street. Without his scrapbooks, his chemicals, and his homely untidiness, he was an uncomfortable man. And it literally just goes on from there to describe that he's super unhappy to have to be away from his house.
Yeah. I feel that.
So there's there's that. So for that whole year, they were just not in London, which is just, in my opinion, very telling. And to Victorian people who thought they were real people, probably would have been very telling. But that's just the first thing. So from Graham Robb in his book, he says, quote, "Everybody already knows instinctively that Holmes is homosexual. Screen adaptations are a good test. The least convincing are always those that provide him with a girlfriend. The most convincing, like Billy Wilder's The Private Life of Sherlock Holmes from 1970, promoted as a love story between two men, are those that exaggerate his camp behaviors." End quote. Because to this day, the gayest Sherlock Holmes that we have is still from the 1970s.
Wow.
Because Billy Wilder, when he made that Sherlock Holmes, he wanted him to be gay, but he couldn't, because it was the 1970s. So he queer-coded the hell out of his character. He's wearing makeup, and he's super camp.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
All right, time to start a podcast where we watch every version of Sherlock Holmes and give it a rating on the queer scale.
There's a Russian version that's in Russian that is also apparently very gay, surprisingly.
Wow.
And I just saved on my HBO, I think, a Japanese version where they're both women. Called, I think it's called Miss Sherlock.
Oh, that's so cute.
So we're gonna have a watch along.
And I have a whole list full of gay rewrites of the Sherlock Holmes books also, by the way. And I'll just put that up on the resource page. Mm-hmm. So, in the book, Rob mentions as one of his lists of things that Sherlock does that's gay, bathhouses, a place that homosexual men at the time used to visit frequently. The Turkish bathhouse was a place that offered sex and companionship, and the risk of being discovered or blackmailed there was way lower than it was in a brothel, for example. So Rob writes about the bathhouses, quote, "Bathhouse customers could relax in a world where secret signs were no longer necessary. In the bathhouse, the normal situation was reversed. It would have taken more ingenuity to avoid a homosexual encounter." Now, according to the original Sherlock Holmes stories, Holmes and Watson used to visit the Turkish bathhouses together a lot. In The Adventure of the Illustrious Client, for example, Watson writes, quote, "Both Holmes and I had a weakness for the Turkish bath. It was over a smoke in the pleasant lassitude of the drying room that I have found him less reticent and more human than anywhere else."
Human, because you touched it dingly.
Not the tingly.
So, another thing that's worth mentioning from, according to Rob's book, quote, "In 1894, queer had already acquired its modern sense. Oscar Wilde's prosecutor, the Marquis of Queensberry, referred that year to, quote, 'the snob queers like Roseberry,' is his quote. So, when you use the word queer at this point, when you see it applied to a person, you don't have to necessarily assume that it means weird. You have to really take in the context around it. Mm-hmm. Because it does mean gay also at this point.
Yeah.
Also, words like earnest and languid were both applied frequently to gay men, which also apply a lot of the times to Holmes in the books. We've got Mycroft Holmes, Sherlock's brother, spent an enormous amount of time in the Diogenes Club, which, according to Arthur Conan Doyle himself, quote, "The Diogenes Club is the queerest club in London." And Mycroft, one of the queerest men.
Oh!
So speaking of clubs and bars, people who have read the books would know the Criterion Bar as the place where Dr. John Watson met his friend Stamford on the night before being introduced to Sherlock Holmes. What isn't as commonly known is its history as a Victorian-era gay bar.
Cute.
Here's a picture of the real Criterion bar. Has a plaque on its wall commemorating how this happened there. The plaque says, for the listeners, here, New Year's Day, 1881, at the Criterion Long Bar, Stamford dresser at Bart's met Dr. John H. Watson and led him to the immortality and Sherlock Holmes. And then there's the tiny print that I can't read.
The Sherlock Holmes Society of London and the Baker Street Irregulars, 1981, by the Inverness Capers of Akron, Ohio. Akron.
Is it still kind of like a gay bar? Or is it now like a historical site? Mainly because I'm just like, whenever I get to London, I want to go there.
Now it's a restaurant.
But is it a gay restaurant?
It is considered an opulent restaurant, so not the kind that I would ever go to.
So for fancy gays.
Yeah, for fancy gays.
I'm not a very fancy gay.
Me either.
I'm a mossy gay.
So now, official gay bars were not really a thing in Victorian era due to the anti-LGBT laws, but like underground gay bars, those existed. Listen to our last episode about drag balls. They happened. So the Criterion Bar was known when the stories were written as a meeting point for gay men. The Criterion Bar is spoken about by somebody named George Cecil Ives, who was an LGBT advocate in the Victorian era and leader of a secret LGBT society, which was a society for the cultivation of a homosexual, moral, ethical, cultural, and spiritual ethos.
Whoa.
That's a mouthful.
Yeah.
Yeah. His stance was that he didn't think that gay people were ever going to be able to sort of exist in, out in public, so he just made a secret society for them.
Probably a good call at the time.
And interestingly, George Cecil Ives was also friends with Oscar Wilde and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle.
Sir Arthur Conan Doyle was a little bit gay.
Just a wee bit.
A lot of it gay.
In that cricket picture I showed you, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle and George Cecil Ives were both on that cricket team.
I'm never a gay person when I hear about all of the gay evidence.
It makes me think of the SpongeBob when he's showing Patrick all the diapers.
Yes.
And you're like, maybe he's not that gay. No.
Okay, so when it comes to Sherlock Holmes, of all the bars within London that could be chosen for Dr. Watson and Stamford to meet and for Watson to be led from to be introduced to Holmes, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle chose to use that one, which was a well-known secret gay bar. Because nothing is ever really, truly secret. Even gay people were not truly secret in London as long as you weren't, super, super, super loud about it.
Yeah. They had to be, fashionable about it.
Yeah, you had to be fashionable gay and not grossly indecent, like Oscar Wilde.
Yeah.
You had to carry a gun.
So, Rob also writes that, quote, the softer human emotions in Holmes are reserved entirely for Watson, end quote. And when Watson praises him, Holmes, quote, flushed up with pleasure at my words, this is from the book, and the earnest way in which I uttered them. I had already observed that he was as sensitive to flattery on the score of his art as any girl could be of her beauty, end quote.
Oh my god. They're in love.
And then Holmes tries to, woo Watson with, cooking and cleaning and things like that occasionally. At one point, he cooks him a meal of oysters, an aphrodisiac,
Uh-huh.
And then he impresses him at one point, by, laying him on the sofa and telling him to sleep and playing him the violin until he goes to bed.
As you do.
As you do for your straight friends.
That is so cute.
And then this part also from Graham Robb's book that it's just not even worth paraphrasing because just it's great. Quote, Happily, Mrs. Watson never materializes and has the grace to be dead by 1904.
Oh, shit.
The quote continues, "Old times return with many moments of fervent intimacy. Watson's hands are clutched, his knees padded, and his ears brushed by Holmes' whispering lips. When the trial leads out of London, they sleep in the same room." End quote.
Oh my god, it's really hot. So steamy.
Yep.
Save this for the other podcast. You dirty dog.
So, Holmes leads what would have been considered a distinctly homosexual life. He frequents the Turkish baths. He reads things that people would have considered to have homosexual connotations, like Horace and Thoreau, and also gossip newspapers. He frequents opium dens, and he cross-dresses. There's a paper called London and Culture of Homosexuality, 1885 to 1914, by Matt Cook. In there, he details a bunch of various ways that men could be stereotyped as homosexual at the time, such as being effeminate, being a bachelor, being a theater goer, being a dandy, wearing cologne, living a bohemian lifestyle, literally describing Sherlock Holmes.
Being alive.
Yeah, you could just use every word to describe Sherlock Holmes. Also Oscar Wilde. So also during the Victorian times, and this one's very weird. If you just don't think about it from our time perspective, just gotta think about it from being a Victorian man perspective.
Okay. Hold on. I have to get into the headspace.
Okay, do it.
Wait, am I a straight man?
Yes.
Or a gay man?
A straight man.
Straight man. Okay. I was like, you said yes, and I was like, I had asked both, so I was like, okay, I'm bisexual. So, okay, straight. Think of, God, I can't think of any straight Victorian guys.
I'm straight Victorian man. Women don't use their brains to
Look at
think
that
that their
table leg, isn't it
uteruses
attractive?
move in a terrifying way. Oh. Oh.
All right, I think I'm
Someone
ready.
put the tablecloth on
Another
it.
way you can identify the homosexual man of the time was if they were clean shaven. So Cook says that though it's not a definitive indication of sexual deviance, being clean shaven was a commonly noted feature of defendants in cases of gross indecency between men. Because, you know, the Victorian man is gay to shave. Their beards and stuff, like their beards and their mustaches and things. But if you have a perfectly clean shaven face, you have to be gay, according to the Victorian man during these cases.
It's gay to shave, everybody! You heard it here first!
So, Sherlock Holmes, in the books, is literally always described as being clean shaven. And he's always displayed in every movie he's portrayed as having a clean shaven face in every adaptation ever.
Yes, yeah.
The symbolism of facial hair was really important during the era, and everyone living in the late 19th century would have been familiar with that particular feature of masculinity and what it would have meant to have or not have the facial hair. This would have just been obvious.
You know what I'm just now thinking of? Y'all have seen The Great Mouse Detective, right?
Yes.
I feel like that mouse was probably the straightest Sherlock Holmes there ever was.
Was he?
I mean, he wasn't super straight, but he was straighter than the others, I feel like. Maybe I should watch it again. Maybe this is my excuse to watch it again. But I feel like Radigan was very queer-coded. Oh my god, you're absolutely right. Never mind. This gif. I forgot about this gif and his obsession with his hat. Absolutely. But also Radigan was coded as very... Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, they were...
Into
Oh no, they
Radigan.
were ex-boyfriends.
Oh my god, also...
What luck! Oh my god, you're absolutely right. I can't believe I thought for a second.
He's also
I take it all
gay.
back.
Even the mouse Sherlock is gay.
Yeah.
Look at him.
Oh man. He's so cute. He was also one of my anthropomorphic crushes.
He is pretty cute. The Dr. Watson in this version, though, is a real dummy.
Oh,
They did a real disservice to him.
Yeah, that was a bummer. Maybe that's why. Because I was like, there's no chemistry between him and anybody.
No.
Except for Radigan.
Look at this posture. He's super gay.
He's got the hip cock. He's got the
cape.
The cape.
I mean, he has the top
got
hat.
The long cigarette stick.
Yeah, he walks around like reminiscent of Cruella de Vil. Like, oh
God,
he was a very good villain.
Oh man,
but yeah, they had more chemistry. So
they had good chemistry. Okay, so yes, Doyle. Maybe he thought it would be too obvious if both Sherlock Holmes and Watson were both clean-shaven bachelors who lived together and, like, you know, shared their beds sometimes and kept the shutters drawn and, you know, did stuff like that. So Watson had a mustache and also a beard, his wife.
So sorry. Got me, man.
His poor wife, who he frequently abandoned in order to be with his friend. And also there's a period of time where he lived at Baker Street with Holmes, even while he was still married to her, supposedly.
Oh. Yikes. I hope she was getting some on the side.
Probably. I bet she was a lesbian. He was gay and she was a lesbian, and they were just convenient.
Yeah.
That's my theory.
Yeah. Yeah. As any good, like, beard theory can be. Like, yeah.
So when she conveniently died, just before Holmes returned from the dead, this is in the book, it's 100 years old, it's not a spoiler, Watson moved back in with Holmes at Baker Street for good, and he literally never married again or lived anywhere else. So maybe Watson's facial hair just indicated that he was bisexual.
Yeah, it doesn't go all the way. It's just above the lip. That's adorable.
It's not even worth going into the times Holmes has said some variation of, quote, from the books, "Women have seldom been an attraction to me," quote. Or this one, quote, "Now, Watson, the fair sex is your department," quote.
And see, like, this could be very, like, man passing. Like, it could have been very passing. Like, because guys in the Victorian times, I feel like, were just like, women exist and we like to fuck them, and that's
Some
about
of them,
it.
yeah. Now, this one, a little bit darker, but I'm going to follow it up with something that's really cute.
Okay.
Holmes trains, quote, "a gang of little urchins," and in The Hound of Baskervilles from 1901, adopts a 14-year-old telegraph boy as his valet, which was hardly an innocent act after the Cleveland Street scandal, quote from Rob's book. So this occurred some years earlier and involved young telegraph boys who worked as prostitutes for older, wealthy men. Rob notes that Holmes' pack of boys not only help out with errands, but also, quote, "fill up the gap of loneliness and isolation," quote, which sometimes clouded Holmes, implying perhaps some other relationship beyond casework. Also, Holmes says stuff like that, fills up the gap of loneliness, in the book that this happens in. It doesn't say that anything happens, but when that book came out, this event, the Cleveland Street scandal, where the telegraph boys were used in this, like, prostitution stuff, that was literally ongoing when the book came out.
Oh, shit.
It's a little sus.
And Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, it certainly wouldn't have been the first time that he had written a book filled with like things that were going on in the times in order to sort of like capture the audience, because that's what he had been doing in previous novels when his sales were sort of like floundering. Like in the second Sherlock Holmes novel, he wrote in some current events because he was like, my sales are really not going where I want them to go. So he wrote in some current events so that people would buy the books.
Interesting. That's a unique technique. Yeah.
So certainly when you combine literally all the rest of the evidence, it's kind of a weird detail to stick in there. So Rob says with all the other evidence that homosexuality is, quote, an essential part of his character, quote. And now just for my favorite scene from all the stories, because it's very nice and very gay. Not to cloud your judgment, but you'll probably agree with me anyway. And I already quoted it on the TikTok, so you'll already have heard it already. So, it's from The Adventure of the Three Garridebs. I'm gonna read it.
Yes.
In an instant, he had whisked out a revolver from his breast and had fired 2 shots. I felt a sudden hot sear as if a red-hot iron had been pressed to my thigh. There was a crash as Holmes' pistol came down on the man's head. I had a vision of him sprawling upon the floor with blood running down his face while Holmes rummaged him for weapons. Then my friend's wiry arms were round me, and he was leading me to a chair. "You're not hurt, Watson. For God's sake, say that you're not hurt." It was worth a wound. It was worth many wounds to look the depth of loyalty and love which lay behind that cold mask. The clear, hard eyes were dimmed for a moment, and the firm lips were shaking. For the one and only time I caught a glimpse of a great heart as well as of a great brain. All my years of humble but single-minded service culminated in that moment of revelation. "It's nothing, Holmes. It's a mere scratch." He had ripped up my trousers with his pocket knife. "You're right," he cried with an immense sigh of relief. "It is quite superficial." His face set like flint as he glared at our prisoner, who was sitting up with a dazed face. "By the Lord, it is as well for you. If you had killed my Watson, you would not have got out of this room alive." That's the end of the quote.
Gay!
Wow. I'm surprised he didn't go to trial. Like, that is blatant. I love it.
You can picture it.
Yeah. I saw the movie in my brain.
And there's so many times that Watson has thought about literally the word handsome when thinking about Holmes. Or literally at one point, he thought the word dreamy when thinking about Holmes's eyes. I was looking at quotes. He literally thought the words, his dreamy eyes.
Oh my God. They're in love. That's so cute.
Gay!
Or I read earlier, I said earlier when I was going through my notes with you, all the times that they, hands or like or he like leans close and whispers in his ear and you were like, that's hot. Well, how about some of these little tiny quotes? "He seized my hand in the darkness," quote, or "still holding my hand in one of his, he opened a door," quote, or "I felt Holmes's hand steal into mine," quote, or "I don't like it," he whispered, putting his lips to my very ear, quote, or "his hand closed like a vice upon my wrist in his agitation. Then he broke into a low laugh and put his lips to my ear," quote, etc. There's so many.
This is literally the same language that we use to indicate flirtation and closeness in our romance books.
Yes. Absolutely.
Or just like how often they literally just sleep in the same room with each other. Like, quote, "We have shared the same room for some years, and it would be amusing if we ended by sharing the same cell," quote. Or, quote, "You'll come with me, won't you? If I can be of use. Oh, a trusty comrade is always of use, and a chronicler still more so. My room at the Cedars has a double bed." Yeah.
Gay!
Or, yeah. Or, the many times they're going off to go on a case, and some lines such as this will be spoken. We drove to the Hereford Arms, where a room had already been engaged for us. A single room, just the one room.
A single room, just the one room.
And then, of course, like I already said, Sherlock Holmes has connections with a lot of different Victorian laws and scandals that have happened in the real life as they're happening. So Holmes appears in France literally 2 months after an amendment was made about gross indecency being a crime. He appeared in February 1890 during the publicity about the Cleveland Street scandal. He asks Watson to run away with him to the continent after nearly losing his life in Vere Street, which is the name associated with homosexual scandals like all the time. Because in like life in the real world, the Vere Street coterie was a group of men arrested at what's called a Molly House, which is a meeting place for gay men on Vere Street in London, which is a real place, in 1810 for sodomy and attempted sodomy.
Wow.
The Vere Street coterie is also known in connection with alleged same-sex marriages that happened there from a guy named Reverend John Church, who is sympathetic to the homosexual plight.
Aww. Is there a biography about John Church?
Yeah, he was an independent minister who was most famous for his involvement in the homosexual scandal of the Vere Street coterie. He's claimed by some as the first openly gay ordained Christian minister in England. It's unprovable, though circumstantial evidence may suggest that his inordinate affections, which led me into error, quote, could be referring to homosexuality. He was found as a toddler, barely able to walk, on the steps of St. John's Church. Here's the Vere Street stuff. In the course of 1813, rumors began to spread in the Weekly Dispatch and other pamphlets and broadsides, connecting Church with the White Swan, a well-known homosexual brothel or gay bar in modern parlance, in Vere Street, saying that Church was its chaplain and had performed mock marriage ceremonies for its male customers, subsequently recognized by some modern historians as same-sex marriages. And then Church denied it because he doesn't want to go to jail. And then he claimed that it was just propaganda by his clerical opponents.
I mean, yeah, that happens.
Attempted prosecutions against him for sodomy failed, and his following did not decline. Indeed, in 1814, he founded a new chapel, later known as the Obelisk Tabernacle, designed to accommodate larger numbers. His first wife died, having borne him 4 children, and he remarried not long afterwards to a wife of unknown name, though she is thought to have been the proprietor of a ladies' seminary.
Wow. Well, that's... I hope that he... If reincarnation is a thing, I hope that he's reborn as, like, a happy person. With a happy life.
Me too. There is an article called A Short History of the British Gay Bar that you could read. I'll link it. I'll put it on the resource page.
Yeah!
And then, of course, Sherlock Holmes is not unique. This is just like, he's just one of plenty of sexually ambiguous detectives, and like, with an unusually devoted companion, which appears more often than you might think in literature, that just sort of came out of this time period. In the book, Rob lists other pairings that follow the same sort of mold, but acknowledges that it wasn't conscious imitation, since no one at the time outed Holmes as being homosexual, except for maybe just some casual humorists, he says, quote. So, like, even people during the time said, maybe this guy's gay, but, like, as a joke. But Rob does list similarities between like, the different private detective type fictional characters that are queer-coded. So just the list of those, so that you can just, like, hear them. Heightened awareness, the wearing of masks, literally or figuratively, a streetwise reading of signs, you know how Sherlock can just, like, see things other people can't see. The ability to operate in different milieux, so, like, Sherlock cross-dresses or puts on, like, the sailor outfit when he's at the docks or whatever. Reading the secret configurations of the city, understanding the sexual singularity was key to a hidden world, habit of avoiding detection, ability to identify others who are similar, domestic arrangements open to change, knows how to converse with strangers, and then he argues that the detective figure and the success of these stories and characters, including Sherlock Holmes shows a direct and positive influence of gay culture on the majority culture, quote. Because people super loved these characters. And everybody was kind of just reading them as gay, because it was, all the signs are really obvious when you are a Victorian person, but nobody wanted to just be super loud about it, because everybody super loved Sherlock Holmes, like to such an annoying degree that Arthur Conan Doyle really grew to hate the fact that Sherlock Holmes was so popular.
Yeah.
So Rob just says that the fact that somebody that like a clearly queer-coded character was so popular just had a direct and positive influence on the queer culture of the time, and just does good. Which circles right back around to my point that sometimes queer coding is just used for good purposes when you're in a society that can't handle it.
Yeah. They're not ready yet.
Like for us, it's not the 19th century anymore. And almost all of the stories, and next year it will be literally all of them, of Sherlock Holmes and Watson are open in the public domain. So Sherlock and Watson, soon they will be free to love each other openly after 100 years. They will no longer be trapped in the closet.
Yes. I want all of the fan fiction to come to life.
Thanks, everybody, for listening. We are very excited to take your questions, too, because we want to hear them and we want to answer them, and we are so super qualified to answer questions. So what you can do is you could visit our website, which is whywouldyouskthat.com, and go to that little contact form, throw in a question, or you could email us at whywouldyouskthatpod@gmail.com. So please send us your questions. We don't care how weird it is, how gross it is. Just don't ask any personal questions. That's our one line. Ask your weird questions. That's what we want. So thank you for listening. This is M, Karen, and Remy, and ask us some shit. Thank you. Good night.